Right, so hi everyone. I think that's enough time now for the people who want to join to join. If any others join, we'll obviously just welcome as they come. So welcome along to the first airline industry user group with Tableau. It's a pleasure to be able to host this. My name's Tom Barber and I'm a manager of data products at Virgin Atlantic. So Tableau approached me to host these user groups and I gladly took up the challenge. So as you'll see on this start slide, we've got a community page which you can go and register on if you haven't done it already, where we'll be posting all the latest news and be hosting this, putting a recording up of this webinar afterwards. And joining me, we have Kieran Flynn from Tableau, who will do a little introduction in a second. But just to give you a bit of an idea about what we're planning in the future, in October, when we have the Tableau conference in New Orleans, we're going to be hosting an airline meetup. We're still getting to the lower level details of that, but as soon as we know dates, we'll host them on the group. And also the next one of these is planned for early November. And again, we're just finalising the dates on that and we'll let you know. So without the last thing, is just to tell you about the questions. If you do have any questions for myself or Kieran, there's a Q&A section in the bottom of the window on your screens. So feel free to just post your questions on there and we will answer them at the end of both of our sessions. So without further ado, if I'll hand over to Kieran, who will introduce himself and take you through the first part of this session.
Perfect. Thank you, Tom. Hello to everyone, and welcome to the first airline industry user group. I hope you're all having a great day. So Tom just introduced me there briefly. So I am a product consultant at Tableau in EMEA, and I'll just run through a bit of the agenda that we're going to cover today. I'll get a bit into myself now in a moment, just to let you know who I am and why I've been asked to present on behalf of Tableau for this particular user group. The agenda that we're going to cover from my perspective, so the first little bit of this session today is who I am, why I'm here talking to you guys. Also, I want to discuss what you can take away from this, from both my examples, from what I'm going to say in the next couple of minutes, and also from Tom's examples too. And maybe at the end then, with those questions that get asked, we can take some inspiration from each other to go off and bring some insights to our own day-to-day tasks with data. I'll just briefly touch on some of the use cases that I see with the airlines that I work with. And then I'll go through a programmatic advertising analysis example, something that I worked on in another life with another company. And I built some dashboards to kind of simulate how that would work or how that works in theory. Cool. So who am I? I actually started off straight out of university working for an in-flight entertainment vendor. And we obviously created these lovely seat-back displays that contained everything from your latest TV shows, your movies, to shopping carts. And while we were doing that, our primary objective was to deliver content to the people sitting in the seat. But we realized that there was a unique opportunity that we had. We had somebody captive. We had an audience captive for a moment. And we thought, well, we can capture data on this and we can drive insight to position products in front of them for future flights or to know what content is actually relevant. If you think about some of the systems that might fly in your aircraft nowadays, maybe Thales or Panasonic systems, they're archaic and they don't have this capability, or it's very difficult to take away this insight from those players. And there's a lot to be gathered. Same way with websites and Facebook, we can take this information, we can mine it to realize some value in it so that we can deliver a better service. So I'll touch on that in a moment as well. I've engaged with a number of different clients. The two clients I'm going to mention here, Aer Lingus and Lufthansa, they both have customer success stories on the Tableau website. So I strongly encourage you to go back to that and have a look at those. They've just some quotes there, increasing efficiency by 30%, being able to change the way the culture of doing things in Aer Lingus, with working on Excels, missing insights, to discovering that there's a huge contract that they have with their MROs. That means they're spending more money than they should, and they've already got agreed contracts, and they're invoicing extra and saving a whole bunch of cash for the airlines. And these are just two examples, and they go into further detail on the website with video recordings and text-based content. And finally, I am a huge cat fan. I accidentally changed my photo to our corporate Yammer page and realized it went out to all my emails with this photo on it. So just thought that might be fun to throw in there. So what I want you to do is I want you to take away a couple of things today after this webinar, from my piece, from Tom's piece, from the questions, from everyone. The entire community, this user group is built so that you get inspiration and ideas from each other. The first thing I want you to do is say, you can do it. You can take away something. You can go away with an idea or some inspiration, and you can say, I'm going to go and get the data from whoever I want, or from whoever has it, and do what I need to do to deliver some insight. So thinking about, I can do this. This is not going to be impossible. I can achieve this within my own organization. And inspiration. So we're going to show you some examples. I've got an example. We're going to talk about some examples. And Tom's got an example. And maybe something that we show you might trigger an idea in your head. And you might say, okay, I'm going to take that can-do attitude, go get the data, and then I'm going to try to replicate or enhance what we've already shown. That can always be very good. And that in turn leads to a call to action. So actually leaving the call and going and doing this, like putting yourself in the position to go and actually achieve what you want to achieve. Okay, so having worked with not only Aer Lingus and Lufthansa, but also some other airlines within Europe, we've come across some popular airline use cases. Now, some of these will not be unusual to you, but some might also be eye-opening to think that there might be some potential or some value that might be derived from some other area of the business. As you can imagine, seat occupancy analysis, knowing what flights have, vacant seats, why are we not selling them? Are we competing with another airline on that route? What can we do to actually change this? What can we do to drive, initiatives to either compete with the other airlines or go into a route or a destination where maybe an airline's no longer running it, and thinking, why did it fail for them? How could we potentially take advantage of this? Another interesting one is internal audit report enhancements. I worked with a customer who was in the audit department of a very large airline group, and they had an initiative where from C-level down, they said every audit you have to do must include some data analysis. So you're talking to a certain area of the business, you have to request data from them and use Tableau to see if there's something wrong, or see if there's a value that can be derived from it. Is there, protocols and procedures that aren't being followed, and can Tableau help tell that story? So there's a lot of this audit report enhancements that can come into play. Obviously, your sales analysis, you want to check, where are my sales coming from? What's my sales funnel look like? Is it web driven? Is it coming from my new mobile app that I just released? Is it in the airport last minute with cash? So nothing new there, fairly obvious. One other use case I worked on was pilot safety analysis. So I had a customer who had Excel files and CSV files that were coming in from a different third-party vendor, where they were recording the approach of the aircraft, the different data points that were being captured on how the plane landed, who was captaining the aircraft, who was the third pilot, or all these different details. So actually looking into pilot safety and doing an analysis on who do we need to train? Is there safety concerns or risks that we might need to mitigate? Another use case, marketing and loyalty program performance. Pretty straightforward. Don't need to go into too much detail on that. Catering wastage analysis was an interesting one I worked on. It was essentially, as you can imagine, talking to your catering companies that are on the ground in different hubs and finding out, well, what are you giving me? How are you deciding to give me that many meals for this flight? How many am I selling? How many am I throwing out? Where am I losing money? Where could I potentially be a bit more streamlined with regards to this and know exactly what I need to put on each plane? The MRO example, the line item inventory, worked a little bit with Aer Lingus on this one, but just briefly. Basically knowing what spare parts you had available with your MRO, and that was just essentially being able to know if you needed to forward plan for a particular part of an aircraft or a line item that you might have otherwise forgotten about. We touched on route planning a moment ago, so Again, you can scrape the web to pull in information about all the other flights from all the other competitors and try to find out a pattern of when someone might have stopped doing a route or planning a route. And then you can say, well, why don't we look into this? We're a low-cost carrier. Why don't we look at providing a route to the public and seeing if that will work compared to the last one? And then there's staff rostering. So looking at what staff are being used on the ground with the airline, so your cabin crew, your pilots, and knowing how long they're spending in the air as well. I know there's a lot of legislation that governs how much time pilots can fly and how much time people can be in the air and all those different things. So just analyzing that and having an overview of how your staff is being utilized. And then we get on to the programmatic advertising. So this is kind of touching on my experience when I was working with the in-flight entertainment company. So we were creating these displays that were delivering content back to the passenger sitting in the seat. So we knew that we could collect data through the in-flight entertainment system. And this allowed us, from clicks on movies to, browsing shopping catalogs, to we finally got it running with one customer or one airline, and the ability to actually have a transaction happen on the display. And then once the plane landed, weighed on wheels, transactions got processed, etc., we were able to know their buying patterns. So we could track and we could say, joining the manifest data of the flight with the details that we had from the in-flight entertainment system, we could build a profile on some of these regular passengers. We could get very smart with how we actually planned what we were going to show to them. So we were building profiles of the customers through usage, or at least this was the idea, was to build these profiles of the customer and get this up to a very well-defined and well-structured picture of what they are and what they like to do. So I touched on, there's very few places where we have an audience captive for a moment where they have to sit in a seat strapped in, literally. So we were positioning onboard products to the right audience during these captive moments, a taxi, takeoff and landing. We knew we had the audience there, captured, waiting, looking at the screens, and we could take that and use that to our advantage. This led to, of course, understanding our customers better, but even better still was it was generating revenue for the airlines. So the unique selling point for us when we were selling this system was your cost center, which is, you're buying this new system for your aircraft, now becomes a revenue generating part of the business. So whereas we sold this piece of hardware and the software, we were now generating revenue off the back of this, because we were pushing the sales through the system. It was one less thing that the cabin crew had to worry about. They just had to make a list of who ordered what and then deliver it to the seat. Or in some cases, we actually had shipping from the ground back to the residence of the passenger. So my example I'm going to show you next it's just based on this. And I've just simply, the data is not real. I've actually used Tableau's Superstore dataset with some other supplementary datasets. And I've gone ahead and created this. So let me pull that up here and just walk through this. So the idea here is, it is simply the Superstore dataset. So all the passengers that exist in this dataset are all Superstore customers, but I've taken out some different data sources. The first one there, you might draw your attention to this one, is just that kind of the great circle routes that exist. I've chosen for this example Hamburg to be my hub. I've just drawn the lines. So the lighter the lines, the less traffic. But the idea here is I want to analyze the revenue that I'm generating from this new programmatic advertising initiative that I'm running. So I've only just started it. I put it on my entire fleet. I've just kitted it out with the latest IFE. How's it going? So in that particular moment, I've had just over 100,000 passengers. I've generated 240K through the actual system, which is great. This is my per passenger revenue. It's just another metric. I was trying to think of some cool metrics to look at. And then the distinct count of flights, for example, and an average revenue per day. The awesome thing here is just being able to filter down. I can look at my medium haul aircraft, see where they're flying, what route's most expensive. I can look at my short haul aircraft, the local flights in Europe. I can check what's going on there. And if I don't select them, I can see which flights actually compare way up against each other. So you got some of these long haul flights that fall down here and make no revenue at all. Or I've got some of these short haul flights or medium haul flights that make a lot of revenue even though they've got less passengers. So it led me very quickly to understand how this model was working for me. I've got some that don't even make that much at all down here. But better yet, I was able to take this example and go a bit further. Got me thinking. I started to really like these custom maps with Tableau and being able to do a floor plan of factories and hospitals and all these things. It's like, why can't we do that with a LOPA of an aircraft? So I did. I'll take a specific route, for example, this one here, and I'll select a drill down for this route. And I can drill straight into a profile of where those passengers sit. What was the total passenger numbers on this flight? How many of those interacted with the ad? How many of them were part of the club membership loyalty program I run? What was the number of people who ordered from the ad, and then eventually the revenue that was generated from a specific route or flight. And I could then find out with my different demographics, males, females, where do they sit? So males, I can see where they're sitting. I can check, 18 to 29-year-olds, where are they sitting on the aircraft? Not surprisingly, they are not paying for first class. But if I check some of the other age groups, you might find them falling into first class, maybe business travelers. But the entire time, the whole dashboard is filtering and changing as I'm interacting with it. As I'm trying to understand that audience a bit better, I'm getting more insight. So I can select, for example, 45 to 59, I generated this much money. Here's how much interactions with ads. I might want to drive that number up. I might want to, have more people order from an ad. I can understand the brands. What brands am I showing? If I'm showing Guinness, for example, who's looking at the Guinness ads? I generated no revenue from that. What about the Dior fragrances? Nothing generated from that. So you can click through these to see what actually gets generated from these brands. What should I be showing? What should I not be showing? Who should I be showing it to? I'm trying to find a brand here now that actually has some sales relating to it. And it's proving to be quite difficult. L'Oreal, who knew it? So 25 euro generated on this particular ad being shown, but it was shown to 19 customers. So my conversion rate is pretty low. The interactions might be the ad prompts somebody to touch to find out more information. And then after that, there's an order form or a buy now button that might be used. This is just a quick example. I built this entire data set on the back of Superstore, and it didn't take that long to use. What I want to try to inspire you guys to do is to think about the data sets that exist within your organizations and think about what you can do. All this data exists. I talk to airlines that have, bucketfuls of data from years and years and years. And you know who these passengers are, and you can do some analysis to find out more about them, build that profile up a bit higher. So hopefully this is available. I have this actually available on my Tableau public profile. So if you want to take a look at this or play with it yourself, it's by no means perfect. It's based on Superstore, but the idea is to provoke thought and to inspire others to use this. So I will leave you there. I'll pass over to Tom now for Tom's piece of the presentation.
Thanks very much, Kieran. Yeah, some great stuff there. So I think so. Kieran showed a few examples of the kind of art of the possible, but what I'm looking to show you guys is a little bit more around how we've come up with, we've kind of solved some of the challenges we have here at Virgin Atlantic, more around actually getting people to use the tool and making it easier to use. So although I'm not going to show any really fancy reports, we're basically trying to demonstrate how with a few little simple tips we can show that we can actually build production ready, like good looking reports in minutes. So as we said before, if you have any questions for me or indeed for Kieran, just use the question and answer dialogue at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get started. So as we said, I'm a data product manager at Virgin Atlantic, so my responsibility is to really try and build out with our data engineering teams our our commercial data landscape. So everything from revenue through to inventory, all of our digital data, and also look after our analytical stack, and how, things like Tableau, Alteryx, Power BI, all of those kind of tools, and how our analysts use those. So on a personal side, like with Kieran, I like to show some cheesy photos. So I mainly spend most of my time traveling around our network, doing weekends to places like New York, and tiring myself out. But I also tire myself out at the other end of the day by DJing at some of the big clubs in London, and have done events like Brighton Pride and Manchester Pride with Virgin Atlantic as well, which is great. So for those of you that aren't aware, Virgin Atlantic, we're relatively small airline based on fleet size. We're 49 wide-bodied aircraft, including like the classics like the Boeing 747, as well as brand new aircraft coming in like the A350 and the 787. We serve 33 destinations around the world, primarily in America and the Far East, directly from a couple of bases in the UK, with the biggest being Heathrow and Gatwick. And with our partners, that boosts that number up to over 200. So we partner with some other big airlines around the world through code shares and interlines. We have 8.9 thousand employees, of which the majority of those are crew, based around the world. So within our head office functions, analytical functions, there's probably around 2,000 people, which is really what our scope of analytical requirements is. So to take you on to our story, now Virgin Atlantic, when I joined, had only just adopted Tableau and Alteryx, and they're sort of playing around with them a little bit. So we didn't have a function that was looking after these tools or the processes around them. It was all done within our revenue management area, which was great, but actually it presented a little bit of an issue in that you don't have like a central point of control around it. You haven't really got the resources to build out the standards and really coach people. So a lot of what I'm going to demonstrate today is how we've managed to do tiny little things using just myself, basically, to slowly chip away and build up this area. So where were we before Tableau and Alteryx came in? Probably quite similar to a lot of the other organisations out there, outside of airlines as well. We have a load of analysts who are responsible for letting decision makers know what they need. And we have data that sits in loads of different places, both in-house and sometimes on the web, where you have to physically go on the website, choose what you want, and then download it as a spreadsheet or a CSV file, and then use that in your analysis. And then all of those data sources were interrogated by the analysts, and a lot of the time the data source that the analyst went to would be based on their personal preference as to what they actually want to see, and maybe on their experiences of which ones they know well, and they all have different naming conventions and levels of granularity or accuracy. So all of these analysts would be interrogating these data sources and producing Excel spreadsheets, like Excel reports. Some of them would even produce access databases, because that's how they prefer to join the data. And if there was data that they couldn't fit in an Excel spreadsheet, they'd need to combine it and join it using Access. And all of those reports that they were generating would be fired off as Excel sheets to the decision makers, which caused a bit of confusion, because there'd be a lot of duplicates across those. Those would normally look something like this, which I'm sure a lot of you would be quite familiar with. So just a massive table of numbers with maybe a little bit of conventional formatting, but overall quite hard to consume. So that brings us on to what else they really did. The analysts would also maybe try and cut that data into maybe our different regions or different origins, destinations, or segments, and they would then fire those across as like PowerPoints instead, maybe, or they might even make them into PDFs and fire them across to decision makers. All of this by email, which just ended up with the decision makers being a little bit confused. So then from that, Alteryx was brought into the airline to look at solving that first problem of automating or allowing analysts to produce workflows to create that initial data for their reports. But that still presented a problem, because although they could do the data source joining and the preparation, what they were still doing was firing all of this similar reporting over to decision makers, which was continuing the confusion in decision makers, and in a way they weren't as fussed about how long it was, the ease of the process at the start. So they didn't really notice a great deal of difference. So on top of that, Tableau was then introduced to us, and we brought that in to actually create the reports to then allow the decision makers to access using Tableau server. But there we had a bit of a problem where our analysts were not necessarily opened up to the more visual way of producing reports. So they would end up just producing a report that was basically a mimic of the Excel spreadsheet, maybe with a little bit of interaction with filters and that kind of stuff. But ultimately, it wasn't really embracing the power of Tableau. And so when we got to actually embed these tools within the initial functions they were being used in, so our revenue management function, analysts, it was safe to say, got in a bit of a bad habit. The way they use these tools was to create a workflow in Alteryx, and to update the report, they'll be opening a workflow in Alteryx, running that workflow, then opening the workbook in Tableau Desktop, refreshing the data source manually within Tableau Desktop, saving the workbook, publishing that to Tableau server, and then email the decision makers to then say that workbook was updated on the server, which is all very manual, because each of those steps takes time and analysts actually having to do some work. So that's where I joined the company in sort of late 2016, and after 5 years prior to Virgin, I was at EasyJet within their Centre of Excellence. So I was tasked to bring in some of the stuff that I'd learnt there and improve on that, and to see how we could improve the situation. So although I had a day job to do, managing a lot of our inventory data sources and our inventory reporting, I had to find ways of chipping away at this problem. So the first thing I did was to look at how we could produce some standards on our reporting. So the best place to look for that initially is to go, if you have them, is to go to your internal brand guidelines, because within those guidelines you have a wealth of colours that brand accept, normally with all of the values that you need to create those colours, and font styles and all that kind of stuff. Because ultimately, if you're putting your reports into a PowerPoint presentation or sending them externally, you want them to be matching your brand guidelines. And alongside that, we could take a look at things like our website, because on there we have colours where for things like cabins, where we have red for our economy cabin and a purpley colour for upper class. So we could look on there and start thinking, well, why don't we just use those for our initial standards? So that all culminated in just creating a quick document, as up on the screen now, just a PDF for now, which shows all of our standards just documented out so the analyst could refer to them. Now, this is a nice, simple way of doing it initially, and it was kind of easy to get that signed off because we'd used the brand guidelines and we'd used the colours on the website and things, and people recognised them. So the problem with that is it's now a PDF that's just chilling over on the internet somewhere, and you have to try and direct people towards that. So what we did alongside that was to kind of put that into a quick reference guide, which is a little bit easier to consume, which just showed, a demo dashboard with some key points around what we like to see. But the problem with that is that you end up having people having to constantly make these things every time they make a report, and it can be quite labor intensive, especially when people want to get to analytics quickly and to make some quick reports for their stakeholders. So that's where the next step was for us to make a ready-made template. And these are really simple to do. All you need to do is to create a blank Tableau workbook with containers for all of your formatting, and then some common layouts, which maybe like an A4 layout, a sort of PowerPoint layout, one with, as you can see here, with a section at the top with 2 subsections underneath. And then if we save that into a shared location, analysts can use that as their starting point for their analysis, and they don't have to worry about creating the headers, the footers, and all the stuff that we would like them to do. So with those ready-made templates, we wanted to think, well, actually, how do we make this even easier instead of analysts having to refer to all of this each time? So after a little bit of creative Googling, I found out that one of the first things you can do is add your custom colors into the preferences file of Tableau, so that within Tableau itself, the custom colors will come up as an option alongside all of Tableau's default ones. So this is where we get into the kind of practical tips to do this. So a lot of you may be aware, but to do that, you just literally go into the preferences.tps, which is within the Tableau repository, and you just embed your colors there. And there's a link there that shows to the tutorial that I found, and it's really easy to do and a really quick way of getting the colors and standards embedded within the tool itself. But that wasn't enough for me. I thought, we'd like to do a lot of infographics. So again, I went to the brand guidelines and found a whole load of shapes that we use in our corporate documents that go out to the market, things like the annual report. So I had another Google and worked out how to put custom shapes into Tableau. So that's easy enough to do as well, because in the shapes folders within the folder structure of Tableau, you can simply put a load of JPEG or PNG files of the shapes, and once you've done that and open Tableau again, they will pop up as a new option in the shape palette. And as you see there, the link is to Tableau's own website and talk about shapes. So then I got really creative and thought, well, there's a bit of dead space, in my opinion, at the bottom of Tableau with the sample workbooks. Like, we don't really use the sample workbooks here, and so I thought, well, instead of an analyst having to open their own template and find the template, what if I could get those sample workbooks replaced with those templates? So we set about doing that, and it's actually relatively easy to do. If you go into the Tableau folder route and go into this area here, all you need to do is add your template files into the area and some images that associate with them, so they look presentable when they come up in the tool, and then just edit the manifest code. Just put in the name of the sample file, the name of the image, what you want it to have as a caption when a user hovers over it, and the tooltip as well. And that results in a really nice, neat Tableau desktop, where now a user can open Tableau desktop and then they can literally just click on one of these files at the bottom to bring up the workbook, or a starting workbook for them to go on, which has all the colors and stuff already there. So that was really good. That really changed the amount of reports we saw on our server actually using Tableau's, actually using our production standards. So the last bit for me was, well, we've done everything around presentation. So what about creating some more easy to use data sources on our server? So we have a lot of common data sources, things like inventory or revenue by day or flight. So why don't we make these a little bit easier to consume for the analysts that aren't as familiar with them? So that's where I started thinking about using features such as the folder function on in Tableau Desktop to actually start grouping these like fields within these data sources into subject areas, and then even using things like the default options, so the comments, to show to give the user a definition of the field, and also setting things like the default aggregations or the default colors that should show up if a user drags it onto color or onto text. So we set about creating a few data sources in this way, and tried to work out new ways of doing things. And one of the really creative aspects of that was actually could we actually almost teach a user how to create something like a route map using using just the data source and naming the fields in a way that allows them to do it without having to Google how to do a route map. So we're going to show that in the demo in a bit, but for now, that was the thinking around our data sources. So really, this is a slightly chunked down presentation to the whole thing, which I'm going to be presenting in New Orleans. But just those small little bits there have made quite a big change to how we do things, taking us from the Excel kind of lengthy row by row report on the left over to like nice, neat reports on the right that are hosted on our server and our stakeholders can access at any time. And with that, I'd like to show you a demo of just how quickly we can create a report of just some key statistics. Obviously, these are all dummy data sources; they're not the real ones, but it just gives you a bit of an idea of how quickly this kind of stuff can be done. So I'm just going to swap over to Tableau Desktop now, and just make sure that nothing is okay. Cool. I'll answer all the questions at the end. So I'm just going to go over to Tableau Desktop now. So this is our live version of Tableau Desktop. We're currently on 10.5. So as I said, an analyst can literally just open it up, click on the offline report, and here it comes up with a ready-made template that they can use with a load of different items here. And when a analyst is online, I'm not actually on the network at the moment, they will get presented with a how-to page, which we've hosted on our internal conference site, which is like a Wikipedia page, which tells them how to use that template and links to the actual production standards, which just comes up embedded within the actual window here. So if I go to this one, which is, I didn't want to risk connecting live to data sources on the network, so I've created a package workbook for this. So as I say, the analyst will open up a workbook. I'll have the format here, and then they can literally go in, create their data. So as a starting point, let's have a look at the route map. So as I mentioned, we can do, I worked out actually we can do things like we can actually embed kind of the instructions on how to build a route map, like a kind of step-by-step data source, as we call them. So you can see here that I've renamed it as the steps of how to do it. So if we go through here, that always does this. I should have double checked this. Let's just locate it. One annoying thing here is that our things go a little bit wrong sometimes. Okay, just bear with me 2 secs. Hopefully that won't happen for all of them, but if it does, I apologise. So I know now that actually Tableau Desktop itself actually recognises airport codes, which is great for our industry. But this is an example of back when it didn't. So you have your latitude, longitude, and it just go through here and it says double click, double click. As you can see, we're starting to build up a route map here. And then it says double click path ID. And then there's a kind of a dummy step in here of change mark type to line. So you can change the mark type to line. and then path order, place on path. And that gives a very basic route map. Now I'm just gonna make it a little bit better, just to make it a little bit nicer to view, just because I like it with a few circles on. So just do something like that. And this is all something we could also do as a step by step, but this is almost taking a route map and making it a little bit more advanced. So do something like that. So now we've got our route map using this data source, and then I'm going to do something using our fact tables. So this will give us a capacity by route and cabin. So as you can see in here, it's got some common fields that can be joined to other data sources. We got cabins. So if I drag cabin onto color, for example, that should have been default, so that's one, right? So if we want to look at our year-on-year comparison, these are all been put in here as calculated fields, so users don't have to worry about that kind of thing. So if we do our capacity year over year, and then do that by departure month year, and you can see there that the colors have been automatically put in to say whether it's positive or negative. And then if I pop it on there and I'll do a bar chart, and that gives a nice capacity over year chart really quickly. So let's just call that capacity. So I always get out of this habit of actually renaming sheets and then get confused when I need to make a dashboard. And then finally, I'm just going to do some region buttons, which is also, again, on a nice step-by-step guide. So if we go into here, we can say button width, for example, first step. And because this is quite a little bit more complex, I use the extra tooltips to give instructions. So we're going to place as average on columns, right-click on axis, and then just remove the axis. So average, I can never find average quickly, and then reduce this from 0 to 1. This is just a nice little button interface that we quite like using. So this is drag on rows, right click and hide. So drag on rows, right click and hide. Not hide, sorry. Show header, sorry, I need to change that. I confused myself with that. And then button business region, drag on label, button color, drag on color, which gives us our color. And then hide tooltip, because the tooltips just aren't that great on here. So this gives us our buttons. Cool. And then that's basically all we need now to create our thing. I'm just going to quickly go through here to make sure I've got everything on here I need, just to make sure this filters correctly. Business region. Okay. So on our dashboard now, I can literally just go in here for capacity, and then I want my route map down here, and I want my buttons here. This off. And actually, because these are so flexible now, I can go in here, select the layout container. I'm going to do it on the bottom one actually, just to make sure it does move, because sometimes it can get a bit fiddly, and swap that around so it's like that. So now, in theory, if I just quickly, I'll just do it as a, oops, sorry, users filter just for now. So now, let's mess this up. So now we get to a point where we have a dashboard that can be feasibly just put online, and it's looking good. So we've done that in, if I'd done that quickly, I would have done it in a couple of minutes. And that's just using a couple of small things that we've done to make that right. So with that, I think that's about it for this now. So I think we've had a few questions come up over the session. So I think Jordan is going to help us out by reading a few out, and we'll aim to answer as many as we can in the next 5 to 10 minutes.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. And I did see a couple of questions that came through in the chat box during the session. So if you guys don't mind, go ahead and putting those in Q&A just so we can make sure we're getting everyone's questions answered. That would be awesome. So the first question, and I think this is for you, Tom, is were you using other tools such as BizObjects or just Excel?
So primarily it was Excel, and yeah, there were tools like business objects that were generating Excel outputs, but primarily the kind of analyst mentality here originally was to extract into Excel, then process, then send out as a report.
Awesome.
Which is yeah.
Perfect. How easy was it to convince decision makers to use the Tableau reports? Often people want to keep using what they're used to.
I think yeah, it's always a challenging one, but I think as soon as we could highlight to them that there was two things. There was one, that the fact that you can access it at any time, like almost on demand, was really helpful, and we showed them how to use features such as the favorites function, so they could put all their most important reports in their favorites bit. And then also showed them that when they did want to see things on email, like if they were on the move, because we didn't currently have Tableau Mobile, we demonstrated how they could use subscriptions. And for some of our higher stakeholders, we just set up the subscriptions for them and sent them out as if they were an initial report, but then encouraged them that they could click on it and it would go into the actual interactive report itself.
Perfect. Have you encountered many limitations with Tableau Server, for example, having stakeholders create views like using Excel pivot tables?
So we haven't got that far yet. That's something that we want to explore. So I'd be interested to hear if anyone's had any interesting experiences there. But I would like to see a time as we get some more mature data sources when we could actually release them to our stakeholders to use it, as you say, like a pivot table in Excel.
Perfect. Did you guys find a way to draw the route in a curve instead of a straight line?
We haven't yet, but I've seen a few things floating around online, and obviously Kieran showed a nice curve on his. So yeah, it'd be good to see that actually working. So yeah, it'd be great to see how we can adapt that to make that work.
Perfect. Do you have the capability to attach a PDF version of a report/dashboard and email it out to users?
We haven't enabled that yet at the moment, but I believe it's possible through tools such as Tab Command. I don't quote me on that at the moment, but I'm not sure if Kieran can help with that. But I think you can export as a PDF and then get it sent using like a batch process with Tab Command and Windows stuff.
Yeah, exactly. With some of the APIs and scripting tools, you'll be able to achieve lots of different customized behavior that we wouldn't be supported from the GUI, but would be completely supported through custom scripts, just like you mentioned there, Tab Command or APIs.
Yeah.
Perfect. Something else?
Nothing. That's it for that one. I think we actually we used on one of our weekly reports. We used Tableau server to export a PDF for a load of different sheets, and then combine that up with some PowerPoint presentations that other people had got from around the business that weren't in Tableau yet, and that formed one of our weekly reports. So we used some PDF blending software to put that together and then send it out. But again, that was slightly manual, so it would be great if we could identify some more automated ways of doing that.
Awesome. How is performance when data is located in multiple locations, such as Excel, Oracle tables, etc.?
So our general thing is that because a lot of our data is batch at the moment, so it's only really updated every day. Naturally, we'd love to get to a point where we're more real time. But we literally set up processes to extract it into Tableau data extracts, well now Hyper extracts on the server every morning. So the performance is fine because they're all Tableau data extracts basically, and they don't take that long to update in the mornings because we try and do incremental refreshes where we can.
Perfect. And then have you figured out how to create a dashed line?
No, in short.
Awesome.
Haven't actually come up with any real use cases for it yet, because normally if someone wants like a year-over-year line, we'll just do it as a grey, like a lighter grey on top of a darker grey, so it kind of looks a bit washed out.
Yeah. Okay. Are you on Tableau Online or an on-site server? Do you have challenges with latencies from users accessing dashboards off-site?
Yeah, so we are currently on Tableau on-site, and as to be honest, we haven't got a massive user base at the moment accessing off-site, but we are starting to get more of that. So we need to do a piece of work to actually test how good their experience is. So yeah, I can't really comment on that at the moment, but yeah, it'll be a great subject for a future user group, really.
Awesome. So that's all the questions we have right now. We'll give it another minute or two. So if anyone else has anything else they would like to ask, please don't be shy and go ahead and pop it in the Q&A right now.
I might just add to that final comment about the on-prem in the cloud SaaS-based offering as well. We have a lot of customers that choose either or migrate from one to the other based on latency and based on access permissions. So you have lots of freedom and flexibility there. I have a lot of customers currently moving into the cloud with Amazon AWS or with Microsoft Azure or Google Cloud. So those options are all available to you, and tend to have a lot of configuration options to tune performance and to avoid latency for your users on the go.
Yeah, makes sense. I think one of our things is to be a bit more cloud first. So I think there'll be certainly a time when we'll be looking at Tableau in the cloud, whether it be Azure or something like that. But yeah, it'd be great to see if we can make that happen.
Awesome. How was the aircraft diagram created that was used to show seat availability?
Yeah, so that one, all I did was took a generic LOPA off an aircraft. Obviously, I've got in my dashboard, I had 3 different aircrafts of different sizes and probably different seat configurations. But I took one just for an example. I'm sure they're available to you internally. And what you have to do is there's an exercise of mapping the XY coordinates of each seat. And along with that diagram, that image of the LOPA, the seat configuration, you need to accompany that with the XY coordinates. This can simply be done using Microsoft Paint, but there's also some programs available online where people allow you to upload an image and point at the seat and then reference it saying 1A, 1B, 1C. And some of those programs are quite smart because you can create an equal distance between each point that'll just map it in 2 seconds for you and get you kind of up and running really quickly.
Perfect.
I think that's one that's great for the low-cost carriers because the seat maps are generally a little bit less complicated.
Yeah, absolutely.
We found ours were very complicated because we got about 5 different fleet types. So yeah.
Awesome. Will I find online a guide on how to create sample workbooks like you guys did, or can you guys share your slides? I know the recording will be shared, but are you guys able to share your slides as well?
Yeah, I think we can. I can certainly share the links, and the slides are fine to share. So I might take my cheesy images off, but yeah, I think all those links tell you exactly how to do it. And all credit to the people that wrote those blogs. Really, it's none of my doing.
And then, would you be able to include a link with the seat mapping sites as well?
Yeah, I'm going to have to dig that one up, and maybe that can be one of the additions that we can add onto the user group page as a resource so that everyone has it in the future. But I'll have to dig that one out. I haven't used it in a while.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool. Is that all of the questions? I haven't actually looked because I don't know how to use Zoom. I'll use my thank you slide from the Tableau conference app. It's all good. So yeah, I think that's everything that we had planned on the agenda today. As we said before, we're looking at getting these in regularly. We're going to aim to have a meet up at Tableau conference in New Orleans for any of you that are going, and we'll communicate details of that using the community page. And we're also going to look at hosting another one of these in November. Just confirm the date. But with that in mind, we'd love it if any of you are interested in presenting some of your stories from your own airlines or organisations. So if you're interested, feel free to get in touch with me. My email address is at the bottom of of that slide there. It's just thomas.barber@fly.virgin.com, or post it in the questions, or just contact me in any way you feel you'd like to, and we'll get you involved for next time. But the Tableau conference, New Orleans one will be more of a kind of networking meetup, but the November one would definitely like some content which you guys share. And I think that's everything there. So yeah, it was great to have so many of you join us for this first Tableau Airline user group. And any ideas, let me know.
Yeah, thank you guys. And just to reiterate again, the recording will be available in the next day or two. We'll make sure that all those slides and resources get attached to where that's posted. But thank you guys both for taking the time to do this. We really appreciate it, and we're looking forward to next time.
Absolutely, you're welcome. Thanks guys.
Have a good one.
Thanks for your support.
Take care.
Bye.